been tasked with putting together the board reporting for your startup and scale up and don't know where to start? Well, today I'm going to show you what you need to include. Hi, my name is Alysha Randall and I am a fractional CFO for Fast Growth Consulting, and I also train new and aspiring CFOs and FDs for startup and scale ups. And today I wanted to have a look at board reporting and what does the board really want to know about, and how you can put it all together. So essentially, the board meeting, the point of it is to inform and engage the board members, but also facilitate decision making. So essentially, what you're doing is putting a pack together that lets them know all of the operational and executive decisions that have been made in the business. And sometimes it's asking for approval or guidance, but they need to know what is going on at a high level, obviously, particularly around strategy. So it's more than just documents. It's essentially looking at where they currently are, where the business currently is, and what the roadmap is for the future, so that the board members can really grasp what's coming up, what direction is the business going towards. So it's looking at both financial health as well as the strategic direction. So you're not really just trying to summarize the performance and what has happened, but you really need to provide key takeaways and also recommendations that the executive team is planning to do. So the board team will probably ask a lot of questions and challenge the business to make sure that you're making the right thing. Because remember, a board team, essentially your audience, they're seasoned professionals and they're just looking for clarity and relevance and insight. So structuring a board report, a good way for you to put it together is thinking about how who needs to obviously contribute, and it also needs to be quite concise but also comprehensive. So a good way to put it together, as I said, is most startups I work with, they just use Google Slides. The reason for that is because everyone can access it, and each slide will have while it's being drafted, will have a person's name in the top right-hand corner in red, and that is the person that needs to complete that slide. And then before it goes to the board, you delete all of those names, and then everyone is quite clear on what they need to do. So usually you start with an executive summary. So this is just a clear overview of the performance. Also, it's good to have your key financials in there and KPIs. It should really just be a summary of what is coming up, a snapshot of the current process. Generally, it's the founder or CEO that will complete that. The next one then is the financials. So whether you decide to just do a snapshot of the P&L and maybe a little bit on cash flow, and then put in the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement in the appendix, the detailed ones, or maybe you have a board that wants to look at the 3 financial statements in a lot of detail. So I wouldn't advise that, but there are some boards that really want to really get into the financials. So I would start with high-level income statement, a few key takeaways in the analysis, maybe cash flows, because again, with startup, cash flow is quite important, and then put all the detail in the appendix. So generally, you want to be talking about any material variances, give a bit of context to the numbers, and anything that's unusual. It's also worthwhile highlighting the accomplishments and challenges that you've had since the last meeting. Then you would look at financial ratios and KPIs. So obviously you'll have your North Star KPIs. You may have 2 or 3 that are worthwhile talking about every single board meeting, but the rest of them, you should actually really think about mixing it up. So what is the things that you want to tell the board about? Again, successes and challenges, and then put in the KPIs that kind of highlight those successes or those challenges so that they can understand. Particularly with the challenges, if you find that the KPI has gone down or in a negative direction, and then you've identified it and then it's picked up again. They're good ones to show the board. Then it's looking at progress towards business objectives. So you will have strategic goals, generally, the longer term ones, and then you'll have, more operational goals. These have probably already been discussed with the board or informed the board annually. And then this one, you can see how you're tracking against all those goals and then just address any variances to that, any mitigation that you're doing against those variances. You can then talk about risk management and forecast. Again, it depends on your board with the forecast. They may want to just have an annual budget and you track against that, or they may be keen for a quarterly forecast. It just depends on your audience and also how you've kind of set that up. Risk management, rather than just going through all of the risks, it's more the things that you are doing to mitigate those risks and areas that you feel that may need addressed. Special focus areas. So again, thinking about the stage that the business is in, there may be some specific things or challenges that have got to do with seasonality, fundraising, market analysis, or even sometimes capital expenditure, or even competitors and sometimes regulatory issues. So you should always have a focus area that you can kind of, I hate to use this term, deep dive in and really think about how you're going to tackle that. And then you should have your conclusions and your recommendations. So you end with, these are the actions we're taking, and encourages the board to kind of engage with strategic discussions and make those decisions. When putting things together on each of the slides, things that I would recommend is instead of having a lot of numbers, I would recommend visuals. So using charts and graphs as much as possible. It's much easier to see when you're looking at something quickly rather than reading individual numbers. And particularly if you have a couple of board members who aren't particularly great at finance, they will also understand a chart much easier, and it's much more interesting to read. I would also look at, when you're comparing the analysis or when you're looking at things and addressing how it's performing, it's always worthwhile making sure that you're comparing to prior periods, not just budgets, but also industry averages and competitors' averages, if you know what they are. It's always worthwhile making sure that you're not just talking about what has happened, particularly as finance people, sometimes you can look at what has happened. It should be much more forward-looking. The board is interested about what's coming up next, what you're going to do about things, particularly if you have investors on your board. And then finally, I would recommend you prepare questions. I mean, ideally, you want to think about the questions they're going to ask and include that in your slides. But sometimes you can't always do that. And particularly if you have a contentious issue, I would brainstorm potential questions that your board may ask. And again, either include these in the reports or bring the notes with you, particularly if you are talking about things at a high level, and then bring the details with you so that if they want more clarification or more understanding on the details that of the high level that you've provided, you've got all the details in front of you, you can answer the questions immediately rather than having to go back to the board. Anyway, that is all of my recommendations for preparing for a board meeting and board reporting. I do offer a leadership guide if you are interested in accessing that, and you can download all the different ways that you can prepare for a leadership role, whether you're hoping to get that leadership role or you are already in it. And I'll leave the link below, and please subscribe if you can. I'll see you next week. Cheers.